Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Welcome to first ILTR webinar. My name is Amit, moderator of today's ILTR webinar. So before invite our key speakers, I would like to ask Professor Hide, the chair of ILTR, to share the opening remark for today's ILTR webinar. So Hide, floor is yours.
Thanks, Amit. Hello, everyone. I am Hideaki Shibata from Hokkaido University, Japan, and the chair of the ILTR. Welcome all. ILTR, International Long-Term Ecological Research Network, is a global network of research sites and scientists working at long-term and site-based research for various topics on ecology, ecosystems, and social ecological systems. So more than 40 countries and member networks are involved, and more than 700 individual sites are registered around the world. So this webinar series are designed to share and learn new findings, various new findings and knowledge from research, recent research at LTR sites around the world, especially by early career and young scientists. So today, we invite two outstanding speakers for this first webinar of the ILTR webinar series. So I hope all of you enjoy this program. And thank you.
Thank you, Hide, for sharing your opening remark. Now, today we have very great speakers. One is Dr. Riley from US LTR, and another good speakers from one of the ILTR initiative, tea composition initiative and nitrogen initiative, Dr. Theo. So welcome on both of you. So without wasting our time, let's get started. So I would like to invite Dr. Riley to share her presentation. So I'm going to stop my screen and then, yeah, please, Riley, floor is yours.
Okay, let me get my screen sharing up. Okay, can you see my screen okay? Great. Well, hi everyone. I want to apologize in advance. I'm fighting a little bit of a seasonal cold, so hopefully my voice holds for the presentation, but I'm really excited to be here today. My name is Riley Andrade. I'm currently a postdoc at the University of Florida working on a decision analysis tool to support migratory bird conservation. I'll be sharing work from the Central Arizona Phoenix Long-Term Ecological Research Network, or CAP-LTR, focus on understanding the interdisciplinary linkages between birds and people in urban ecosystems today. Before I dive too deep into the research and findings, I want to take a step back and acknowledge the range of collaborators who've contributed to these topics. One of the values that I found working in a long-term research site is the ability to foster long-lasting relationships that iteratively build off of previous efforts. So although I started thinking about these topics in 2014, the data sets and ideas that I will talk about in this presentation, especially the household survey questionnaire and the long-term bird point count monitoring, have been occurring in the CAP-LTR area since the early 2000s. So this began well before I joined the team. I also want to make sure to highlight my graduate school advisors, Drs. Kelly Larson, Janet Franklin, and Heather Bateman, as I was very fortunate to collaborate on a variety of topics related to human-wildlife interactions with the support of their labs, including getting me tapped into this wonderful research network early on. I'm going to go ahead and start with my requisite slide on why urban ecology and social ecological systems are vital areas of research. Globally, we have seen a shift in the last century from agricultural to industrial and post-industrial societies. As a result, urbanization was and continues to be a driving force for global change. Urban areas are growing both in terms of population and land use. The land areas of cities increased by over 9,000 kilometers square per year between 1985 and 2015. For comparison, the London metropolitan area is around 8,000 kilometers squared. So we're gaining about 1 London worth of land area per year to the global urban land use, which is an incredibly large amount per year. These rapid environmental changes have a number of impacts on both people and biological diversity, with urbanization typically viewed as the endpoint of disturbance, with ill effects such as habitat loss or fragmentation and the loss of nature experiences for people. As a result, urban systems are often overlooked as landscapes that can support native biodiversity or meaningful interactions between people and nature. Human-environment interactions are important for a variety of reasons. In particular, conservation efforts are often closely connected to people's experiences with nature. Studies from a variety of disciplines, especially conservation psychology, have connected people's experiences to their engagement in stewardship activities to support conservation efforts. And with 50% of the people currently living in cities and those numbers growing, those experiences people have are likely going to be within an urban frame. The management decisions that people make then go on to influence the spatial configuration and environmental composition of the urban landscape, such as a person planting native vegetation in their backyard or by supporting the preservation of open space. The management decisions that people make across scales structure ecological communities and thereby biodiversity. That biodiversity combined with other biophysical features of the landscape then go on to shape future experiences and perceptions. So these interactions and relationships are iterative over time. My work looks to untangle these iterative interactions between people's nature experiences and their subsequent management decisions that influence urban biodiversity. Today, I'll be using a few examples from the CAP LTR to specifically focus on the interactions between birds and people. I think the birds are an especially interesting study taxa to consider human-wildlife interactions because the effects of urbanization on bird communities are relatively well studied from an ecological standpoint. And for the people living in cities, birds are frequently encountered wildlife that are easy to see and hear, as well as hold deeper meanings intertwined with memory, culture, and place. There are two primary research questions that I ask here. The first is, how have the bird species that people observe close to home changed over time in the Phoenix area? And two, how do people's subsequent experiences with those bird species, especially those who hold regional significance, go on to influence yard stewardship or management behaviors? The research is situated in the Phoenix metropolitan area, home to the CAP long-term ecological research site. Phoenix is located in the southwestern United States and presents a unique case study for a variety of reasons. Phoenix is a sprawling metropolitan area with just under 5 million human inhabitants as of 2020. The region has been characterized by rapid development in the 21st century, which has occurred in a leapfrog pattern, where development first occurs in the surrounding desert environment and then backfills in to connect with the city. Phoenix is also a desert city with over 41 acres of desert parks and preserves within the urban boundaries, creating an interesting spatial structuring of the landscape around the biophysical and topographic features. Located in the Sonoran Desert, Phoenix is hot with temperatures that can exceed 49 degrees Celsius during the summer months and relatively dry, with about 230 millimeters of annual precipitation, largely occurring within two rainy seasons, the summer monsoons and the winter. The Sonoran Desert is the most biodiverse of the North American deserts and harbors a variety of desert specialist bird species, such as the cactus wren pictured here. Although the surrounding environment is desert, the city, some slide jumping. Although the surrounding area is desert, the city is relatively mesic or grassy with landscapes and has a plethora of water. In a 2017 survey, 50% of the householders in Phoenix indicated that they have lawn, with 73% preferring lawns over desert or xeric landscaping options. And unsurprisingly, those lawns in a hot, dry environment take a lot of water to maintain, with over 61% of householders watering their planted yard vegetation over 3 days a week. As a result, Phoenix also provides a variety, my goodness. Sorry, my scroll on my mouse is flipping forward on slides. As a result, Phoenix also provides habitat to a variety of bird species that would not otherwise be found in a desert environment. For example, the rosy-faced lovebird pictured here are non-native seed eaters that forage low to the ground and are quite popular at bird feeders due to their bright colors and gregarious behaviors. There are two long-term data sets that I primarily use to ask questions about birds and people. The first of which is a quantitative household survey questionnaire known as the Phoenix Area Social Survey, or PASS. As a quick overview of the long-term data, PASS was first piloted in 2001 and now has been administered about every 5 years. There's a slightly larger gap between 2011 and 2017, where the survey was designed to better pair with ecological monitoring efforts and allowed for better cross-neighborhood comparisons. The map here on the right is of that 2017 survey, and those orange areas are the neighborhoods that the survey was actually administered within. So here we have so the long-term bird point counts. The survey has been co-located with long-term bird point counts since 2006, allowing for the spatial and temporal integration of social ecological data. If you have any questions about the Phoenix Area Social Survey, I've included the information of Kelly Larson on the slide, who is the current past director and lead social scientist for CAP LTR. She's also been a champion of retaining the long-term integrity of past data while revamping the methods to better address interdisciplinary research questions, especially those related to long-term bird monitoring. So here are the long-term bird monitoring sites. 3 point counts were placed per neighborhood, at least 2,000 meters apart in 2017, and where all birds seen or heard within 20 meters of the site are recorded during the winter and spring seasons, and that occurs during the same time that the household survey was administered. Using that long-term bird data, the first question I ask is how bird species found in residential yards and neighborhoods have changed over time in the Phoenix metro. This graph on the right shows a number of unique bird species observed at each site per year, also known as species richness, as well as the total number of species observed throughout all the sites, and then that's that black line across the top. In general, we can see that bird species richness is declining, but there is also variation between years. However, the decline of species richness over the past 20 years is not evenly distributed across bird species types. The right-hand graph is from a paper published in 2019 in Ecosphere, which shows how occupancy at residential neighborhood sites changed for desert specialist, generalist, and non-native species between 2006 and 2011 specifically. Desert generalist species were the most likely to decrease in occupancy during the time period, with over 50% of the species found at less sites in 2001 than in 2006. Comparatively, we see that relatively few non-native species decreased in occupancy, with about 30% of non-native species actually being found in more sites in 2011 than 2006. So in general, neighborhoods throughout the Phoenix metropolitan region are having less unique bird species over time, with the greatest decline in being desert bird specialist species. The next question you might ask for this is, okay, bird species richness and especially desert species richness is declining. Is this something even tractable to the people living in the same neighborhoods? The answer is yes. People do notice the types of birds found in their neighborhoods. On these series of graphs, we have desert species richness on the x-axis. That is the number of unique bird species found per neighborhood, and the satisfaction with bird variety on the y-axis. People living in neighborhoods were asked as part of the PASS survey to rate their satisfaction with the variety of birds in their yard and neighborhood for each of these points in time. The y-axis is the likelihood that they were satisfied or very satisfied with bird variety, which is consistently and positively related to the number of desert specialist species over time. However, the mechanisms driving this relationship are still questionable. And we can still ask if experiences with certain types of bird species, your desert specialist species, linked to stewardship behaviors, thus ultimately influencing urban conservation efforts. I'm in the midst of answering this question in collaboration with Dr. Nate Shipley, using past data from the 2017 survey, which expanded the scope of questions related to people's perceptions and interactions with birds beyond just satisfaction for a more thorough investigation of human-bird relationships. We theorize that desert bird species are important drivers of people's experiences because of their links to the Sonoran Desert ecosystem. Sense of place is a social construct, but can also be influenced by the biophysical environment. We asked if seeing species unique to a particular region, here the Sonoran Desert, linked to place attachment and attitudes, or subsequently yard stewardship behaviors using a structural equation model. Here I'm presenting the theoretical relationship we predicted that would exist between desert bird diversity, neighborhood place attachment, people's perceptions of birds, desert attitudes, and how those ultimately influenced yard stewardship behaviors. If you aren't familiar with this social science literature, I've also included some high-level definitions on the slide to define what those labels in the boxes mean that were measured through the household survey data. Neighborhood place attachment is the emotional bond between people and place, whereas desert attitudes measure the cognitive evaluations or beliefs based on positive or negative judgments about the desert environment. We also included a variable to capture how people perceived a range of bird community and traits. That's the perceptions of birds box in the middle there. These included color, song, and foraging behaviors. Not visualized here for the sake of slide simplicity. We also included the length of residency or the percent of time someone has spent living in Phoenix and income as control variables, since both of these factors may influence both sense of place and stewardship behaviors. In turn, we look to see how these factors were related to the likelihood that a person engaged in a range of behaviors in their yards, including planting or maintaining trees, shrubs, or flowers, specifically to support bird conservation, maintaining birdhouses on their property, feeding birds, or putting out water in a bowl or bird bath in some fashion. The predicted relationships were statistically supported by the Phoenix area social survey data with some interesting results. First, I'd like to draw your attention to the point that 15% of the variance in behaviors related to yard stewardship was explained by our model. For the ecologists here who are maybe used to seeing higher R-squared values, this is actually really good for predicting human behaviors, which can exhibit a tremendous amount of variation and are really dependent on any specific suite of contextual factors. Desert bird diversity was positively associated with sense of place, as well as people's perceptions of birds, which in turn were particularly important for predicting yard stewardship behaviors. So simply put, the desert birds that people see in their yards and neighborhoods help foster a sense of place and also ultimately influence their likelihood to engage in behaviors that can go on to support urban bird conservation through habitat provisioning. I mentioned this in the beginning, but you probably noticed throughout these series of results that there are a number of potential feedbacks in the relationships established between birds and people. Desert bird species that hold regional significance shaped perceptions and understandings of place, which then go on to influence specific behaviors that provide urban bird habitat. However, many of the desert specialist species are disappearing over time as is people's satisfaction with the variety of birds in their neighborhood. But providing desert habitat throughout yards and residential neighborhoods can help buffer these declines. So what do we do with these results from a conservation standpoint? By focusing on getting people out and experiencing key species that drive human-bird interactions is key here in Phoenix. For example, one of the desert specialist species that might be meaningful for human bird interactions based on different species trait could be the phainopupila, which is a desert specialist species. And it's important that people are continuing to experience these special species that are unique to a region, especially as those species might be less likely to occur in their backyard, which can help move the needle forward by increasing habitat and strengthening public support of broader conservation efforts. Ultimately, equitable access and consideration of people's nature experiences, where the species are, where the people are, and then reducing those inequities will be key in future conservation efforts. So I'm going to wrap up my talk by zooming back out about the broader role that the international LTR may play in this type of research. First, there's the obvious argument that bird species and their declines are global issues that aren't constrained by socio-political boundaries. And also that many birds are migratory, meaning that they're moving across international boundaries, and that coordinated efforts across the entirety of their range will be required for effective conservation strategies. However, these efforts could and should look different depending on local context. For example, local significance of bird species was a key trait in determining stewardship behaviors, and that's going to change depending on who and where you are. Therefore, the consideration of local context and conservation efforts, including initiatives developed by and for nearby communities, is crucial. Even beyond birds, I see a lot of potential in using a global network to help address these large-scale conservation efforts, but based in local understandings, knowledge, and actions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Riley. Very nice presentation, very informative. Now the time to ask a question.
Okay, I can start.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ray, for your very exciting talk about the human and bird interaction in the CAP LTL sites. And then in the last part of your presentation, you are going to compare these CAP findings and the other global sites. So could you explain a little bit more what do you expect if there is a different cultural background, like human consciousness of the nature or such kind of difference of the human system affect that human bird interactions in the other places?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of interesting questions to be asked there, especially when you start to think about maybe the cultural meaning of specific bird species and how that might differ for people. And then also the communities that are found different places that may be more or less biodiverse. Urban areas are interesting in general because you have, the suite of species that you might expect to find in almost any urban area. So like house sparrow or rock pigeons, you're going to see those almost no matter where you are throughout the globe in an urban area. But you're also going to see a lot of species that are unique and reflect the surrounding ecosystem, which hold historical and cultural meaning. And I think that that's where it really becomes important that even though conservation efforts need to happen across this really large global scale, the ways to effectively understand and implement those conservation actions are going to be really locally based on the people that live there and their understandings of birds and then the landscape and biodiversity, generally as well. So what they want from their landscape, their interactions with the landscape, the way they manage the landscape, stewardship behaviors being behaviors that people, intend to benefit the environment by participating in, but also recognizing that just because a person is well-intended doesn't mean that their actions might lead directly to actually providing better habitat for the wildlife species within the city. So thinking about those local level management, preferences and decisions, and also thinking about from that standpoint too, that depending on people's various backgrounds, their expectations for the landscape might differ. So that balance between biodiversity and human well-being might look really different depending on where you are.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. I'm looking forward to your further findings from the global across comparisons.
Yeah,
So,
we had one more question in the chat box.
Yeah.
How well do the local residents identify different species of birds, and how does this knowledge influence their satisfaction with birds in their neighborhood? This is a really good question, and something that I've thought about a lot when we think about things like satisfaction with bird variety. We didn't ask people how well they identified various species, so we don't know their birding knowledge in particular, but other studies have looked at this. And even people who, daily feed the birds or look to observe birds in their yards or close by, can't necessarily name many bird species, much less, identify them as an urban dwelling or specialist bird species. However, there's going to be a lot of traits that are associated with particular species and groups of species, which is where that perceptions of birds variable came in. So we were thinking about things like color or song or foraging behaviors, if they're occurring in large groups and maybe eating the vegetation or plants that you have in your garden, those things are going to be the likely indicators that people, even if they can't identify the birds by name and know what its home range and distribution are, those are going to be the things that are meaningful for the non-ecologists and the non-birders in the room that are still very much a part of urban conservation efforts.
Yeah. So any more? We have still 4 minutes. If you want to ask any questions to Riley. Actually, in India also we have some like NGO who is working to making some like such kind of this kind of nets for home for birds in New Delhi. New Delhi is very crowded and area, urbanized area. So we have very good initiative for such activity. So I'm just thinking about how in like highly urbanized area like Tokyo, New Delhi, how we can make such efforts like to prepare homes for birds in urbanized area. I know like Arizona maybe is a very vast area, not highly urbanized, but compared to like Delhi or Tokyo, it's quite challenging. So do you have any experience?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think I mentioned it that the Phoenix, even though it's an urban area and a big city, it's sprawling. So it's very low level, mainly residential, single family homes type of urbanization, which you said like contrast Tokyo and some of these other places. And the obviously residential yards or gardens is going to look very different in really dense areas where a lot of people are living in condos or apartments. And I think that two things to highlight here. First, that you're probably going to shift a lot of efforts into thinking about public space in those really dense areas. So those shared spaces. So with that, it becomes even more important of considering, the multiple perspectives that people might have of the landscape and biodiversity within those shared spaces, which are also a really important part of their everyday life and well-being, in addition to biodiversity. The other is that even though the city is sprawling, each individual residential parcel in of itself is fairly small, but together build up across the landscape to provide habitat and connectivity and these different things. And I think that highlights that even in dense city, these small patches of green space and habitat are really important both to people and to biodiversity. So wherever we can stick in, like little corner lots or spaces of green, I think that the benefits of that have been kind of repeatedly shown.
So thank you for today great presentation. So I think it's time to move this for second present. Dr. Theo is now working nitrogen initiative and tea composition initiative. So Dr. Theo, floor is yours. Please share your screen.
Yes, thanks for your introduction for me. Okay, I will share. Okay, can you see the slide? Okay. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Theo Kwon. I greet you from the Sapporo in Japan. I'm postdoctoral researcher in Hokkaido University in Japan. And thanks for joining today's ILTR webinar from someplace on the earth. I'm greatly honored that I can introduce my and my colleagues' work in the first ILTR webinar. Thank you, ILTR Chairman, Dr. Sibata, and ILTR Coordinator, Dr. Amit, for planning and organizing this webinar. And today, I would like to talk with the title of Effect of Climate and Atmospheric Nitrogen Deposition on Early to Mid-term Stage Litter Decomposition across biomes. This is the work by international collaboration to understand the litter decomposition on the global scale. As an early career researcher, so I deeply appreciate that I can allowed to present our works on behalf of many prestigious researchers throughout the world. As you know, 2 months ago, 6th assessment report on climate change was issued by IPCC. According to the report, climate change, including global warming by human activity, is not controversial anymore. It is true and our determine the future. Therefore, it is very essential for us to understand the dynamics of climate change. And it became the social common sense and the social campaign that temperature increase to limit global warming should be kept below 2, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial levels. When simulated with the several scenarios named RCP by the end of this century, our changing environments include not only temperature, but also precipitation, nitrogen deposition, and regional extreme weather conditions. Figure NAB shows the change in annual temperature and annual precipitation by the end of this century compared to recent conditions according to RCP 2.6 and 8.5. Not only the overall increase, but also much larger increase of temperature and precipitation at both the Arctic and Antarctic circles make us more worried and concerned. And like that, many researchers predicted more occurrence of regional or local weather extremity. Nitrogen deposition also shows high regional heterogeneity in current and predicted ones by the end of this century for both RCP scenarios. As you know, the main driver of this climate change is the anthropogenic carbon dioxide emission and other greenhouse gases such as nitrous oxide. Our ecosystem, especially the forest, plays an important role as a source and sink of carbon and nitrogen. Therefore, understanding the dynamics of decomposition of organic matters is crucial to understand and deal with climate change, because the cycles of carbon and nitrogen are tightly interrelated with each other, and are mainly driven by the decomposition of soil organic matters, which are highly affected by environmental conditions such as the climate, water quality, and the soil conditions such as the pH, microbial activity and composition, nutrient conditions, and soil fauna, etc. With this necessity to understand the dynamics of organic matter decomposition, the T Composition Initiative started in the summer of 2016 for global and intersite synthesis of decomposition data. Firstly, we standardized the materials with the commercially available T litters and also used the same experimental protocol for global comparison. With this methodology, we are monitoring the decomposition status on the global scale to study the drivers and dynamics over time and to make a better model prediction. Global coverage is like the third one. The number of sites is 570 from terrestrial ecosystems and 300 from aquatic ecosystems with more than 300 participating global institutions. This project was mainly coordinated and led by prestigious European researchers in 2016, and this is one reason why the site of Decomposition Initiative are concentrated in European regions. Since 2016, the research sites have been broadened to other regions throughout the world by the participation of an international group of scientists with a long experience in observational and experimental biogeochemical studies. With this collaborative research and the network, we aim to contribute to the monitoring of biodiversity and ecosystem functioning, public policy making, the experiment, and social and scientific education. Below the publications show the recent articles of Decomposition Initiative. As you can see from the titles of paper, our harmonized data set for global comparison on the global scale can be integrated to regional and local data set so that we can expect a lot of synergistic effects. If you can make time, I recommend you to visit the website of Decomposition Initiative and look through the contents of this website. As one part of the various researches on the Decomposition Initiative, I would like to introduce one topic with the research questions. The first one is, how do climate and the nitrogen deposition affect the litter decomposition with different initial litter quality after 3 months and 12 months? And secondly, we try to predict the potential effects of those factors, it means the climate and nitrogen deposition factors, on litter decomposition in the future. Firstly, we selected the green tea as the representative of robust litter and rooibos tea as the representative of recalcitrant litter. All the tea bags with the same batch production were supplied by Lipton. This assures the same substrate quality for all the sites. The basic size of tea bags made of nylon was 0.25 millimeter, allowing the access of microfauna in addition to microbes and very fine roots. When initial chemical properties of both the teas were referred, we could confirm that green tea is more easily decomposable litter with much more hydrolyzable portion and much lower carbon nitrogen ratio than rooibos tea. Due to this difference in litter quality, we selected green and rooibos teas as robust and recalcitrant litters for each. So harmoniously, starting in summer 2016, at both the hemisphere, we incubated these two types of tea bags into the AH soil layer of around 5 centimeter depth in non-treated field without any nutrient, any fertilizer or treatment. Only I used the data only the non-treated field across 9 biomes from the Arctic to tropical biomes, and we measured mass loss after 3 months and 12 months. The AH soil layer means the topsoil, dark colored and enriched with humus. The numbers of sites and the tea bags were around 400 and 5,000 for each. For the climate and nitrogen deposition data, we used the CHELSA dataset for climate and ACGMIP dataset for the inorganic nitrogen deposition. ACGMIP dataset is the for the use of IPCC report. For climate, we used the average value from the 1979 to 2013. And for nitrogen deposition, we used the average value from 2007 to 2016. This is the result and shows the mass loss of green tea and rooibos tea across biomes after 3 months and 12 months. So firstly, after 3 months, the mass loss of green tea was 2.5 times higher than mass loss of rooibos tea, with green tea 95% and rooibos tea 24%. And after 12 months, now 1 times higher than the rooibos tea, with green tea 66% and rooibos tea 35%. And the climate effect were more conspicuous after 12 months than after 3 months. This is due to the narrower climate gradient in summer for 3 months incubation, 3 months of decomposition. And because the limiting effect of climate in summer season on litter decomposition is weaker than yearly weather condition. And generally speaking, in biome scale, temperate to tropical climates with the proper precipitation and temperature were favorable for litter decomposition. And arid and cold regions showed the lower mass loss, meaning slower decomposition. In case of the Mediterranean biome, where the precipitation in summer is much lower than the precipitation in winter, the mass loss, the low mass loss equivalent to the arid biomes after 3 months decomposition is well understandable considering climate characteristics of the Mediterranean region. Okay, and we examined the mass loss with the gradient of climate and the nitrogen deposition at all biomes with the linear mixed effect model. The designated percentage values show the explained values of each factor for mass loss, and the colored bands show 95% confidence interval. For both the figures, the litter quality was the predominant factor in litter decomposition with 73% and 62% of explained variance. And the precipitation and temperature showed the promoting effect on litter decomposition for both the periods. As well, after 12 months, the precipitation and temperature explained the mass loss more than after 3 months, especially in case of the temperature. Interestingly, the nitrogen deposition also promoted the decomposition of recalcitrant reverse litter with 2% of explained variance. This shows the at temperate biome in summer season, which means the 3 months decomposition. The precipitation controlled the litter decomposition to some extent, but when considered over 12 months, the effect of precipitation could not be seen, though temperature kept the promoting effect on litter decomposition. And importantly, nitrogen deposition retarded the decomposition of both the litters after both the periods with higher explained variance in case of the green tea. Okay, with this our result, we tried to predict the potential effect of the change of climate and nitrogen deposition by the end of this century. According to the IPCC report and other previous studies, the mean annual temperature and precipitation are predicted to increase 1 to 3.7 degrees Celsius and 29 to 65 millimeter in precipitation. And the nitrogen deposition is predicted to increase 1.2 to 1.9 kilogram nitrogen per hectare yearly. And these are the predicted range between the RCP 2.6 and RCP 8.5. When percent change of mass loss by the end of this century was evaluated with our result, the effect of temperature was much higher than the effect of precipitation and nitrogen deposition. And interestingly, at the temperate biome, the nitrogen deposition showed the retarding, the mitigating the effect on litter decompositions. Though we can expect the this kind of mitigating effect on nitrogen deposition on litter decomposition for both the litters at temperate biome, but it will not offset the promoting effect of temperature on litter decomposition. And with this study, we could confirm the litter quality is a predominant driver of litter decomposition. And at biome scales, we can say the warm and humid biomes are favorable climate condition for litter decomposition, while the arid and cold biomes are unfavorable. This is easily predictable, but we could quantify the mass loss of labile and recalcitrant litters across biomes. In all biomes, the temperature and precipitation promote the litter decomposition, and the climate effect on litter decomposition was more significant after 12 months than after 3 months of summer season. In temperate biome, after 12 months, the retardation effect of nitrogen deposition on litter decomposition implies that the increased nitrogen in the future will mitigate but not offset the climate change-induced increase of litter decomposition at the regional scale. And the predicted change of temperature has a much higher impact on litter decomposition than the predicted change of precipitation and the nitrogen deposition. Though as you can see the below part, though we have many things to improve to better understand the effect of changing environments on litter decomposition. These are being addressed on the decomposition initiative now, and we hope that the global collaborative research and data synthesis with standardized protocols such as the decomposition initiative will enhance comprehensive understanding of litter decomposition under climate change and atmospheric nitrogen pollution in the future. Okay, this study was published around two months ago, and these are the co-authors of the article. And we deeply appreciate ILTR Nitrogen Initiative and Unilever. And I'm very thankful to all the devoted and prominent collaborators of Decomposition Initiative. This is all that I prepared for today's webinar. And thank you for your kind attention. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Theo. Very informative presentation. We learned many things from these slides. So now the time for questioning and answering. So anyone who are interested for litter decomposition, so please ask the question directly to Theo-san. Yeah, I'm still
Okay,
waiting.
I have a question until we wait the question from the participants. Yeah, I know that Theo-san has made great effort to analyze so much data from the world. And yeah, they'll analyze thousands of that individual data and then perform the statistical analysis. And what was the most difficult part for your analysis to put together from the various litter data?
Yeah, because this is the collaborative research throughout the world. In some cases, there is unclear information, such as the coordination or the position, or it is just the mistake probably. But I should check that mistakes one by one. And as you could see the data, the graphs, when we analyzed on the global scale, the variation is very high. But we could see some tendency. But not only the global scale, but also the regional or local, the research should be combined to better understanding the decomposition behavior. Yeah.
Okay, so the metadata is very important for this kind of synthesis analysis. Yeah, thanks so much.
So may I ask Dr. Theo questions if you? Yeah, I think there is no question, so I can ask.
Yeah.
So just a quick, I want to know, do you think the geographical distribution is important for such a study? Because I feel like there is just some area gap for collection.
So as you could see the distribution of the site, most of the decomposition initiative sites are concentrated in the European areas. But for the global change, also the Indian area, the China area, and the Southern American area is also very important. So it is one challenge point to narrow, to make the site gaps narrow and narrow. So I think the coordination team of the decomposition initiative are planning to make it more narrow and planning something. But I don't know in more detail. But yeah, it is very important to make the geographical locations narrow and narrow. We need more temperate in biome scale. Most of the sites are included in the temperate biome, right? So yeah, so it is very important to collaborative work on the global scale and in the other areas. Yeah.
I got one question from June. Are there any other potential factor other than temperature, precipitation, and deposition?
It's very also good, very good. The questions. The climate and nitrogen position is macro scale, macroclimate conditions. But many previous studies show the local microclimate and the local biological and chemical trait is very, very important. The site-specific conditions. So 1 year from the last year, the decomposition initiative are collecting the soils and the microorganisms attached to the soils. So we are analyzing biologically and chemically the site-specific characteristics. So it is very important to combine the macro scale condition and the micro scale conditions. Yeah, it is ongoing. So I'm expecting the result. It will be very meaningful, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. So may I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
Like, I'm curious. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Like, we collect the litter decomposition sampling from managed forest ecosystem, managed sites. But how about if we collect the data from non-managed sites, like where the human footprint is high?
Yeah.
So do you think it is quite that the result will be changed, or what effect?
Yeah, actually, the decomposition initiative, our samples include the managed and unmanaged, and also the many experimental sites and experimental forest. Yes. As far as I can, I select only the non-treated sites in this study. So it also includes the experimental forest, but there is no any experiment. When I extracted the samples, but yeah, it should be separately analyzed. I think the untreated and treated sites, and then after that we should combine what is the dynamics of behind the litter decomposition. I think it is a little difficult to consider together. I think, yeah. Yeah. In this study, I only used the untreated, non-treated sites.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks. Anyone? Riley, you can also ask if you are interested.
I have a a quick question. On the one slide, you had the image that I really liked of how the long-term data connected to all these other ideas and initiatives, you had communication on their policy, being thinking about people and connecting to practice and policy. How would you go? This is such a large and complex data set with so much variation. What are some key pieces that you think are especially important to communicate to inform policy, or how do you even go about doing that?
Yeah, actually, for each of the sample, there are many informations. There are the specific their site information and their location, and there are many that information. So, according to their concerns, I think they can extract the samples and they can analyze the data, and they can use the public policy or something. And as you can see, the materials is the bitter tea, green tea, and rooibos tea. So anybody can join to our initiative. So it is very good, the social network to deal with the global warming. Or I think also it can arise the common citizens' perceptions on global warming. Yeah. And I only introduced only 1 year, 12 months data, but we are doing the 3 years. So the 2 years and 3 years and will come the next. And I also introduced on the terrestrial ecosystems, also the aquatic ecosystems, also one part of our initiative. Yeah, I think this is very large, very big, the data set. And yeah, depending on their concerns, they can deal with this data set.
So I think we have only 4 minutes now. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Riley and Dr. Theo for great and informative presentation. And of course, the chair of ILTR, Professor Hide, is with us. So I am also thanks to Hide to join our webinar. And now I think I have to announce, if you don't mind, we have next ILTR webinar on 8th December, mainly around 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Japanese time. And of course, we welcome all of you. So this is just a quick announcement for next webinar. So I think today we learned many things. Once again, thank you very much for your informative presentation and sharing your research findings. So I think this is the time to say thank you to everyone and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
ありがとうございます。